There's a town in the hills of eastern Tennessee where the fog sits low in the valley until almost 10 in the morning. The nearest traffic light is a 15-minute drive. And a whole house with a porch and a yard and your name on the deed costs less than 1 year of rent on a small apartment in Manhattan. You could sit on that porch with a cup of coffee, the whole valley spread out below you, a mortgage smaller than your old parking bill, and not one siren anywhere in earshot. The loudest thing you would hear all morning is a rooster 2 farms over. Right now, people are leaving New York, the center of the world, the city that never sleeps, to move to places exactly like that. On purpose. Families with kids, remote workers in their 30s, retirees who spent 40 years in the same borough. All of them quietly loading a truck and driving toward a life they could finally afford to own. Everybody already knows New Yorkers are leaving. You have seen the headlines, but nobody tells you where they are actually going. And when you finally see the map, it makes no sense. Not at first. A family trades a Brooklyn walk-up for a holler in Kentucky. A remote worker swaps a $3,500 rent check for a paid-off farmhouse on the plains. It looks like a mistake from the outside every single time, until you see the number sitting underneath it. Then it looks like the smartest move in the room. Here is the scale of it. According to the latest census figures, New York lost about 138,000 more people to other states than it gained in a single year, one of the largest outmigrations in the entire country. And the state's growth didn't just slow, it flatlined. One analysis put New York's net gain for 2025 at about 1,000 people, down from around 215,000 the year before. Roughly 60% of the interstate moves touching New York were headed out the door. 8th straight year, it is ranked among the top states people leave. And you already know why. When you add the state income tax to the city income tax, a New York City resident can hand over more than 12% of what they earn before a single other bill gets paid. The median rent has pushed north of $3,500 a month. That is not a poverty story. That is a story about ordinary, working, decent earning people running the arithmetic and realizing the city they love has quietly become a place they can afford to visit, but not to keep. Now, one honest thing before we start, because honesty is the whole point of this channel. The place at number 3 is cheaper than the parking spot some of these folks use to rent in the city. We will get there, and I promise it pays off. But we do not start in the strange places, we start where it still looks completely normal. Every place on this list has to pass 3 tests. Test 1. New Yorkers are genuinely moving there. Not a hunch, not a vibe, real migration data. Test 2. It comes with a real number. The rent, the home price, the tax, the land. The thing that actually decides it when you are staring at your bank account. Test 3. It comes with one honest catch, the insurance, the winter, the drive to the hospital, the job market. And here is the promise that goes with it. I am going to say that catch out loud every single time, because a fresh start is only a win if you walk in with your eyes open. The internet is full of these videos with fake prices and a dream house that turns out to be a swamp you cannot even walk across. That is not what we are doing here. If a place fails, even one of those 3 tests, it does not make the list. And we go in order from the ones that look completely normal to the ones that will make you tilt your head at the screen, because that is the honest shape of this whole story. One quick note. I am a scout, not your accountant, your realtor, or your insurance agent. Numbers change, and they change fast. Verify every figure for your own situation before you move a single box. All right, let's get into it. Number 13. We start with the one everybody expects, because pretending otherwise would be lying to you. Florida. Yes, Florida is still the #1 place New Yorkers land, by a mile. In recent moving data, somewhere around 119,800 households made the New York to Florida jump. Picture the trade. You give up the gray slush of a February commute and you get palm trees, a screened-in porch, and a sky that stays warm when the rest of the country is scraping ice off a windshield. They land all over the state. The Gulf Coast around Tampa and Sarasota. The retirement communities inland, where a whole neighborhood is built around golf carts and warm evenings. The Atlantic side, where a former New Yorker can still hear an accent that sounds like home in the grocery line. The money reason is blunt, and it is powerful. Florida has no state income tax. If you are living on a pension, on Social Security, on savings, keeping that slice of your income instead of handing it to Albany changes the math of your whole retirement. There is a second reason people rarely mention out loud. Florida's homestead protection shields part of the value of your primary home from property taxes and caps how fast that bill can climb once you are in it, which is a real comfort when you are living on a fixed income and cannot absorb surprises. So what is the catch? Insurance. Florida's home insurance market has been brutal for years. Hurricanes, roof rules, carriers pulling out of the state entirely. A place that looks cheap on the listing can quietly cost you a fortune the day the policy renews. So before you fall for the palm trees, you get a real insurance quote in writing for that exact house, in that exact zip code. Do that, and Florida is still the easy, obvious, sunny answer. But the obvious answer is never the interesting one. The map gets stranger from here. Number 12. Cross back north, and the most common move of all is also the shortest one. New Jersey. You would be surprised how many people leave New York by moving about 40 minutes west. A yard instead of a shared hallway. A driveway instead of a 2-year wait for a parking permit. Room for the kids to actually run around. For a lot of families, Jersey is the move that feels like an upgrade without feeling like exile. You keep the region, the food, the people who talk like you. You just get square footage. Plenty of them still ride the train right back into the city for work, so it never even feels like leaving. It feels like finally getting a garage. The catch here is property taxes, and it is a real one. New Jersey carries some of the highest property tax bills in the country, so the mortgage might feel doable, and then the tax bill lands like a second mortgage. The move still pencils out for plenty of people, especially compared to Manhattan rent. But you run the property tax number for the specific town before you sign, because 2 towns 10 minutes apart can hit your budget completely differently. Now, if the short move is Jersey, the quiet move is 1 state over. Number 11. Connecticut. The commuter belt, this is the classic trade-up for the family that outgrew the apartment but still needs the city within reach. And for a lot of these families, the deciding factor is not the house at all. It is the schools. Some of these Connecticut towns run public schools that rival the private academies people were breaking themselves to pay for in the city. And that swap alone can pay for the whole move. Towns with real trees, real schools, a train that can still put you in Manhattan when you have to be there. Stone walls along the road. A yard that gets loud with crickets in July. It feels like you exhaled for the first time in years. The catch is simple. Connecticut is not cheap. Fairfield County, the stretch closest to the city, holds some of the most expensive real estate in the entire country, and the tax picture is heavy too. This is a lateral move for a lot of people, not a bargain. You are not saving money so much as buying a yard and a shorter commute with the money you were already spending. You are buying space and quiet and a shorter leash back to the city, and you are still paying up for it. So this one is honest about what it is. A better life? Maybe. A cheaper one? Not really. If it is cheaper you are after, you have to go a little farther. And a little farther is exactly where it starts getting interesting. Number 10. Pennsylvania, the Poconos in the Lehigh Valley. Now we are talking about a real drop in your cost of living without a plane ticket. The Poconos give you lakes and mountains and cabins tucked into the pines, close enough that people literally commute or split their week between the woods and the city. Fall up there is the kind of thing people drive hours to photograph, and you would get it out your kitchen window. The Lehigh Valley gives you actual towns, actual jobs, a downtown you can walk, and the homes cost a fraction of what the same square footage runs across the New York line. Your dollar simply stretches further the second you cross into Pennsylvania. The catch is that Pennsylvania's tax map is a patchwork. Local taxes, school district taxes, and rules that shift from one municipality to the next. A great deal in one township can turn ordinary a few miles down the road once the local bills stack up. So you check the local taxes, not just the state ones, for the exact address. Get that right, and Pennsylvania is one of the most sensible moves on this whole list. But sensible is not what makes people rub their eyes at the screen. For that, we go south. Number 9, North Carolina. And this one earns its spot with a genuine record. North Carolina was the single biggest domestic migration gainer in the entire country in 2025. On the census net numbers, the state pulled in around 84,100 more people from other states than it lost. That is not a moving company ratio. That is bodies on net choosing North Carolina, and a real share of them came from the Northeast. Picture the pitch. The Piedmont with its rolling green and its warm lawn autumns. The Blue Ridge foothills, where the mornings are cool and the porches are wide. Cities like Raleigh and Charlotte, with actual jobs and a fraction of the housing cost. Up in the mountains, a town like Asheville draws the people who want cool summers and a real art scene without a coastal price tag. A remote worker can trade a shoebox for a real house with a yard and still bank the difference every month. That is the quiet engine behind this whole record. When your paycheck no longer depends on which city you sleep in, you start choosing the city by what it costs to live there. And North Carolina keeps winning that choice. The catch is that the secret is out. Prices in the popular spots are climbing fast, exactly because everybody figured this out at once. And the summers in the flatter parts are hot and sticky in a way that takes a northerner a season to get used to. So if North Carolina is on your list, the deals live a little off the beaten path. In the smaller towns, the crowd hasn't priced up yet. Move a county over from the boom, and the math swings back in your favor. One thing to check when you do, though. In the fast-growing exurbs, some of the newer subdivisions ran ahead of the water and sewer lines. So you confirm whether a place is on city water or a private well before you fall for the price. Speaking of one county over. Number 8. South Carolina. The upstate, tuck up into the northwest corner of the state, the upstate around Greenville and the Blue Ridge foothills, and you find one of the quiet winners of this whole migration. Greenville turned its old downtown into one of the most livable small cities in the South. A real main street with a park and a waterfall right in the middle of it. Drive 20 minutes and you are in the Blue Ridge foothills with more waterfalls and state parks than you could visit in a summer. And the cost of living lets a modest income feel comfortable instead of stretched thin, which for a lot of people is the entire ballgame. People are moving here from the Northeast and finding they can own, plainly and fully, the kind of life they could only rent up north. Real quick before the catch. If you are getting something out of this, if you would rather have the honest version than the hyped up one, do me a favor and tap that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach other folks who are quietly running the same math you are. That's it. Back to the upstate. Here is the catch. And it comes in 2 parts. 1. The summer heat and humidity are no joke. June through September sits on you like a wet towel. 2. If you drift toward the coast chasing the beach, you walk straight into the same hurricane insurance problem we saw in Florida. Stay inland, in the upstate, and you dodge most of that. So South Carolina rewards the person who wants the foothills, not the shoreline. And now, right here, is where the map starts to make no sense to most people. Because from this point on, we are leaving the familiar behind. Now, I point out these catches for a reason. A fresh start in a cheaper place is only a win if the cheaper place doesn't quietly cost you more than the one you left. Quick word before we keep going. Everything we keep pointing out, those are the exact catches we dig out of county records every week. And we have put every single one of them into a set of guides called Frank's Land Report Cheap Living Collection. There is one on the 50 catches hidden in cheap land listings, and that is the one for exactly what we are doing today, plus one on the 40 catches hidden in cheap houses and a state-by-state notebook on where it is actually still cheap and what to ask. They are a few dollars each, instant download, and they are linked right in the description below. All right, back to it. Number 7, Tennessee. The Cumberland Plateau. Now the numbers start bending in your favor in a way that feels almost unfair. Tennessee has no state income tax, none. And the Cumberland Plateau, that long tableland of hardwood forest and hidden gorges and waterfalls, is some of the prettiest cheap country in the eastern half of America. You can still find a house on real acreage up here for a small fraction of what a cramped apartment costs back in the city. Wake up to birdsong instead of sirens, own the ground it sits on, and hand nothing to the state out of your paycheck. Knoxville and Nashville get the headlines, and their prices show it. But the plateau between them is where a modest budget still buys a real piece of country, close enough to a city for a hospital and a hardware store, far enough out that you cannot see your nearest neighbor. The catch on this one is different from every catch so far. There is nothing wrong with the land. The catch is time. Everybody else already figured this out too. Tennessee is one of the fastest growing states in the country, and the plateau is getting bought up. Prices that were almost a joke 5 years ago are climbing hard right now. The steep wooded hollows keep some of it cheap for a little while longer, but that window is closing while we speak. So this is not a warning about a flood or a bad well. It is a warning about the calendar. The honest, gettable Tennessee deal exists today. It may not exist in the same shape a year from now. And if a closing window makes you nervous, the next few places have plenty of room and plenty of time. Number 6, Eastern Kentucky. Deep in the Appalachian Hills. Here's where the price tags start to look like typos. Picture a small frame house tucked into a green Appalachian holler. 20-some acres of hardwood climbing the ridge behind it. A creek running along the bottom. Bird song loud enough to wake you before your alarm. Places like this trade for less than a lot of people finance for an SUV. And the property taxes on a little mountain place run only a few $100s a year. So once you own it, holding it costs almost nothing. For a priced-out family or a remote worker, that is not a vacation fantasy. That is a mortgage-free life inside of a few years. Think about what that actually does to a person. No rent, no mortgage. A tax bill smaller than a phone plan. Suddenly, the pressure that ran your whole life in the city just lifts off your shoulders, and you get your time back along with your money. The catch here is twofold, and I will not soften it. First, a lot of this land sits in a flood zone, and these hills have seen some of the worst flooding in the state's history. Homes wash clean off their foundations, so you pull the flood maps before you sign anything, and you price the flood insurance. Second, the old coal jobs that built these towns are mostly gone. That is a big part of why it is this cheap. So this, one is for the person who brings their own income with them, a pension, remote work, a business that travels. Do that, and you get quiet and green and yours. And if the flood maps in Kentucky spook you, the mountains right next door have a different catch entirely, and it is a sneaky one. Number 5, Southern West Virginia. some of the most dramatic scenery in the eastern United States. Steep, folded mountains, endless forest, mist hanging in the valleys at first light. And a house with real acreage out here can list for the price of a decent used truck. Property values have fallen so far in some counties that the taxes are pocket change. For someone who wants a private mountainside and near zero carrying cost, there is nothing else in the East that competes on pure dollars. Imagine owning your own ridge, not a lot in a subdivision, an actual fold of mountain, with hardwoods that turn gold in October, and a view that changes every hour of the day. That is the kind of thing that costs a fortune almost anywhere else in the country. And out here, it comes with the house. Now the catch, and this is a sneaky one that trips up newcomers. On a lot of Appalachian property, the mineral rights were sold off 100 years ago. That means somebody else may legally own what sits under your land, and in some cases, they hold the right to come and get it. So you ask, in writing, whether the mineral rights convey with the sale, and you pay a title company to run the deed back far enough to prove it, because the answer a seller gives you across a kitchen table is not the answer the courthouse records hold. The second catch is thinner services. When the coal economy collapsed, some of these became the fastest shrinking counties in America. The nearest real grocery store might be a long drive down a curvy mountain road. So West Virginia will take your breath away. Just make sure you know exactly who owns the ground beneath your feet. And speaking of what is hiding underground, the next place makes water itself the whole story. Number 4. The Ozarks, northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. Down here, the game changes because a lot of sellers offer something you rarely see anywhere else. Owner financing, no bank involved. You pay the person who owns the land a little every month and skip the whole mortgage circus. You can find a cabin on 20-some acres of Ozark hardwood, spring-fed rivers and limestone bluffs all around for the price of a used car, and sometimes get started with just a few thousand down. Owner financing means you do not need perfect credit. You need grit. For a lot of people carrying a rough credit history out of an expensive city, that is the door that finally opens. A bank would take one look and say, no. The old farmer who owns the parcel down the road just wants a steady check and a handshake he can trust. That is a completely different way to buy a piece of America. And it is why the Ozarks quietly pull in people the traditional system left behind. The catch is the one people forget to ask about until it is too late. Water. A lot of these cheap parcels have no well. That means hauling water in, catching rainwater, or paying to drill your own, and a new well can cost more than a chunk of the land. There is a second one too. Legal access. Some back parcels are landlocked with no guaranteed public road to your own front door, just a handshake path across a neighbor's field. So you ask one blunt, boring question. Is there deeded legal road access to this property? If the answer comes back fuzzy, you walk, no matter how pretty the pictures are. Get a clear written yes and a plan for water, and you own a slice of the Ozarks people pay 10 times as much for one state over. One more quiet expense to plan for out here? With no city sewer, you are on septic, and the ground has to pass what is called a perk test before it will legally hold a septic field at all. So you ask whether that test has been done, because a failed one turns a bargain into a building project overnight. Now, here is the one I promised you in the very first minute. Number 3. The Great Plains, out where the sky does the heavy lifting. Remember when I said one of these places is cheaper than a city parking spot? This is it. Out on the high plains of Kansas and across into South Dakota, there are whole towns slowly emptying out. The young people left for the cities years ago. The grain elevator still stands tall over the wheat, but half the storefronts on Main Street are dark. And that is exactly why you can own a solid house on real acreage out here for the price of a used sedan. Some of these towns will practically pay you to show up. Plains communities have handed out free building lots just to get young families to move in. Let that number land. In the city, that same money rented you a spot to leave your car. Out here, it buys the whole homestead. And South Dakota adds a kicker that matters enormously on a fixed income tax. It is one of just a handful of states with none at all. If you live on a pension or Social Security, keeping every dollar instead of handing a slice to the state can quietly reshape your entire retirement. The catch is the same thing that made it cheap. These are shrinking towns, so the jobs are thin, and you have to bring your own income or your own hustle. And the winters are savage. The wind has had nothing to slow it down for 1,000 miles, and the cold can drop far below zero. The school might be a long bus ride, and anything fancy is a real drive away. So you have to be honest with yourself. Can you build your own life out here, mostly with your own hands, because the town is not going to build it for you? If the answer is yes, you get more sky than you will ever know what to do with. Land flat enough that you can watch tomorrow's weather roll in for an hour before it arrives. A night so full of stars, with no city glow for 100 miles, that the first time you see it, you will just stand out in the cold and stare. A homestead for the price of a parking space and elbow room measured in acres instead of inches. Now, before the last one, I have to be straight with you about something. Look, you have seen it on every place on this list. The dream is real, the number is real, but there is always a catch waiting in the fine print. And here is the honest truth after doing this a long time. One bad move costs more than everything I have mentioned put together, many times over. One no-tax state that quietly taxes your house to death. One bargain town where you cannot get insured. One cheap acre 2 hours from the nearest hospital. So I put it all in one place. The complete Cheap Living Field Edition. 3 guides, cheap land, cheap houses, and the state-by-state notebook that tells you what each state really costs, plus the due diligence worksheets you carry right to the county office. Bought separately, it would run about $45. Together, it is $29.99, and the worksheets are free in the bundle. Think of it as the cheapest insurance you will ever buy on the biggest move of your life. It is linked right in the description. Now, our last 2, and they might be the ones that surprise you most. Number 2, the Midwest. And this one comes with a fact almost nobody has caught yet. For the first time in about 15 years, the Midwest posted positive net domestic migration. Read that again. The region people spent a generation writing off as flyover country, the place everybody was supposed to be leaving, just flipped. On net, more Americans moved into the Midwest than left it for the first time in a decade and a half. Iowa, Indiana, the smaller cities of Ohio and Missouri, Columbus, Indianapolis, Des Moines, places with real jobs and real universities, and a downtown that has quietly come back to life over the last decade. Houses at prices the coasts forgot existed. A commute measured in minutes instead of an hour. Underground, a garage, a spare room. That becomes an office. A remote worker keeping a coastal salary can live like royalty on a Midwestern cost of living. And a growing number of them are quietly doing exactly that. The same paycheck that felt tight in a New York studio suddenly covers a 4-bedroom house, the car, the savings, and dinner out on Friday, with money still left over at the end of the month. That is not a lifestyle downgrade. For a lot of people, it is the first time in their adult lives that the numbers actually breathe. The catch is the winter in the shrinking small towns. The rural Midwest gets cold and gray for months, and some of the smallest towns are still losing people even as the region overall gains. So you aim for the places that are actually growing, the small cities on the way up, not the ones still fading out. Get that right, and you catch a wave most of the country hasn't even noticed is happening yet. Which brings us, at last, to number 1. And number 1 is not really a place at all. Number 1. For the last one, I want you to forget the map for a second, because the most improbable destination on this entire list, the one that makes the least sense on paper and the most sense the moment you see it, is not a state or a county. It is a feeling. It is standing on a porch at the end of a day and knowing that the ground under your feet is yours. Not rented, not leased, not owned by a landlord who can raise the price on you next spring. Yours, with your name on the deed, free and clear. That is what these people are actually chasing. Not Kentucky, not the Plains, not a zip code. They looked at a place they loved but could no longer afford to own. And they sat down and did the math that most of us are too comfortable to do. And the math said the same thing every time. You can keep renting a gorgeous life you will never own, in a city that will always cost more next year, or you can own a plain, honest one, somewhere quieter, cheaper, and truly yours. 30 years of rent in the city buys you a stack of receipts and a landlord's smile. The same 30 years out here can buy the house, the land, and a paid-off life with room to spare. When you lay it out like that side by side, the so-called crazy choice starts to look like the only sane one on the table. So when people call this move crazy, they have it backwards. These folks are not crazy. They are early. They ran the numbers before the rest of us were willing to. They traded the center of the world for a place that felt like the center of their own lives. Some of that dream really is for sale. In the green hills of Kentucky, in the wide open plains, in a Tennessee holler with fog in the valley till mid-morning. But the answer is not always 1,000 miles away. Sometimes it is a cheap house on cheap land, closer than you think. One you can actually own outright if you know how to spot the catch before it costs you. That is the whole reason this channel exists. I go looking for these places and the traps that come with them, so you can chase the dream without getting burned by the fine print. So there it is. Real places, real numbers, and every catch spoken out loud the way it always should be. If this earned your trust, that is the entire reason I make these. Go ahead and subscribe, because I find these places and I read the fine print so you do not have to learn it the hard way. And if you know somebody who has spent years quietly thinking a place of their own was out of reach for people like them, send them this. 1. It might just change how they see the next chapter of their life. Do your homework. Pull the flood maps. Ask about the well and the mineral rights and the insurance quote in writing. And never ever buy a place you have not stood on with your own 2 feet. And remember, this is not financial, tax, real estate, insurance, or relocation advice. The migration numbers, the home prices, the taxes, the insurance, all of it changes, sometimes fast. Verify every figure for your own zip code and your own income before you move a single box. Your place is out there. Go find it.